Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Scuttlebutt. Every season, we do movie reviews of post 9/11 war movies. If you're a movie buff, you know that there are tons of movies about World War II. There are many well-known movies about the Vietnam War, maybe some not so much of the Korean War, and even less probably of Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and leading up into the post 9/11 generation. War movies tend to come by every few years. Mostly it's about a particular mission, about the particular hero. So what we've decided over the last several seasons is that we want to review post 9/11 generation war movies because, we want to see what the newest generation of movies dealing with the last 20 years of conflict are about. This episode, I will be joined by Army veteran and reservist Ryan All. He's my normal co-host, Kathryn Guyan, and Evan Mulgrave. The two movies that we decided to review for this episode were the 1517 to Paris and the newest craze sweeping the nation, Top Gun Maverick. But first, the 1517 to Paris was a 2018 American biographical drama film, I guess you could call it. This was produced and directed by Clint Eastwood. So obviously a huge name attached to this film. This movie was based on a 2016 autobiography titled The 1517 to Paris, The True Story of a Terrorist, a Train, and Three American Heroes by Jeffrey Stern, Spencer Stone, Anthony Sadler, and Alex Skarlatos. What's interesting about this movie is that Clint Eastwood hired the three American heroes, two of them veterans, to actually play themselves within the movie. That's kind of sort of the shtick of the movie. In the movie, we get to the terrorist attack on this French train and how these Americans, these brave guys, were able to stop this attack. But did we like the movie? You're going to find out in our episode. The second movie we're going to talk about, you've probably heard about, is Top Gun Maverick, the sequel to one of the 80s biggest movies, Top Gun, with Tom Cruise. He comes back as Maverick. You'll see, and Val Kilmer, he comes back as Iceman. There couldn't have been a bigger difference in what we thought of 1517 to Paris and what we thought of Top Gun Maverick. If you have not seen Top Gun Maverick, spoiler alert. So don't watch or listen to this podcast if you haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet. I would highly encourage you to go out and see it now, and then come back and listen to our review of the movie. I think that you're going to have a lot of fun with this episode. We certainly did, watching both of these movies, and even in a spoiler alert for the podcast, Kathryn has never seen the original Top Gun. So she has a great story about what happened before she saw the original Top Gun and then went to see the sequel. We thank you for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. And as always, thank you for watching the Scuttlebutt. Enjoy our movie reviews of the 1517 to Paris and Top Gun Maverick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan All. Glad to be back here to be doing another movie review. And we're hitting up Top Gun Maverick today, so I am pumped. Let's do this.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathryn Guyan, news anchor at WTRF TV by trade, I suppose. Wannabe movie buff, I guess you could call me. And I have some really strong feelings that these guys are not going to like. But nevertheless, I am happy to be back with all three of them.
Can't wait. Evan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Evan Mulgrave, filmmaker, directed the BBC documentary We Left as Brothers, which is almost as much of an adrenaline action ride as Top Gun Maverick. And I'm looking forward to discussing the movies.
Fantastic. From the intro, everybody listening, we're going to break down 1517 to Paris. We're going to get the Top Gun, the original, and Top Gun Maverick, because believe it or not, Kathryn just watched the first one for the first time. So we're going to get to this in all of her opinions. But first off, 1517 to Paris. Kathryn, you did pick this movie.
I did. And I feel like I should apologize, but also I'm not going to apologize because you all got enlightened on a piece of history about three gentlemen who are, well, I guess more than three people, but it was about these three guys who are undoubtedly heroes. But I picked it because it tugs on everything that I enjoy about this kind of post 9/11 category of movies. They used real people who, the three stars of the movie were playing themselves, which I thought was incredible that after what they went through, that they were able to go back and kind of reenact that scenario, because I mean, it was insane. If you watch the movie, I mean, it had to be just as crazy and adrenaline pumping and scary in some scenarios as it was in real life. So I was like, oh, okay, this is awesome that they're going to play themselves. And then at the end, it showed like actual footage of them and the other people from the train, like getting recognized by the French government. And I was like, oh, this is really great. And I wanted to love it. And I was like,
Not the
best. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it like is not at the top of my like must watch list.
As soon as I got done watching the movie, I think I texted or emailed you and I said, I hated this movie. But what I was interested in is that one of our last movie reviews, if you've listened to it, you heard Evan and Ryan both be like, Clint Eastwood, yeah, like, let's go. And I really was.
Well, that was the other thing, yeah.
And I was really like hoping, I wanted to like this movie, but Evan and Ryan, you guys being such big Clint Eastwood fans, what went wrong with this movie?
I'll throw in there and just say, I think the first biggest thing is like, you're taking civilians and being like, hey, act in a blockbuster movie. Like, that's not easy to do. And Clint Eastwood he always makes like very bold choices. And, we've seen that in all the movies he does. He makes some strange things. He makes some strange decisions sometimes. But I think like the biggest thing is like, you're just asking, a person who's not a professional actor to be an actor. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. What do you think, Evan?
I love a lot of his directorial output. I mean, Unforgiven's one of my favorite movies ever. And yeah, especially late period Clint Eastwood, the things that he seems to be interested in can be very strange at times. And I would put this movie in almost like a trilogy of like modern American heroism. You have Sully, you have Richard Jewell in this movie, which kind of looks at what, like everyday common Americans performing a act of heroism in a modernish setting. And this one I would say is the least successful of those. Just a lot of very strange choices. The movie, I remember it being billed very much about like the attack on the train, and that's what the title alludes to and things like that. But most of the movie is not about that. I mean, a lot of it's like a coming of age story when they're children.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this very like tonal whiplash, because the beginning is very like almost corny. Like it's the movie is populated mostly by like television comedic actors like Judy Greer, Jenna Fisher from The Office, the guy from Arrested Development is the gym teacher. So there's like this very light tone to the beginning. And yes, using the actual guys as the actors, there is kind of a gap in experience. And yes, and that it does show through. And then the end is this like very violent, like there's no music over the attack, and it's very visceral and very violent, and it does feel like a whiplash over what we've seen before then. That feels almost like this kind of like corny, hokey kind of like down home story. And I don't know if that was the intention, to show like how traumatic an experience like that would be, to like couch it in all of this very like light fluffy stuff. But I would say that experiment was not entirely successful.
Well, like you got Evan, you and Ryan both mentioned the dialogue, like these actors, and that's kind of what got me, like when they're going through the scenes like on the train and stuff like that, or even when I think it was like Spencer came home and he had just gotten, turned down, and he's like, yelling at his mom, like those types of scenes like felt kind of real to me. But then there's this scene where I think it was Anthony and Spencer were sitting there in that hotel room, and they're talking about how like Spencer was about to leave or whatever, and it was like written dialogue for them, and that's where you could tell, you're like, oh, these guys are not actors. They seem like super uncomfortable. Like it was like an awkward conversation, which you wouldn't have if you were sitting down with a buddy that you've known since like elementary school. It just wouldn't be that weird. Also, you're talking about the beginning, there's like some big plot holes in their childhood that I needed filled in that were not.
overall, true. It's like I was furiously writing notes during this movie, and I think the first note I wrote is, why am I watching a grade school comedy? Like even that first ominous like part of like we're watching the attacker get to the train, suddenly there's this flashback to them as kids, and it wasn't like Disney level talent kids where like, you know, the Goonies, you watch that movie and you're like, all these kids are incredible, you know, like there's this level of talent that somehow Disney finds these kids that can all act really well. This was like, you know, I'm going to pluck this kid from this school and this kid from this school and put him in the movie and let's see what happens. Plus, weirdly, they like all knew the same handshake, even though they were just sort of meeting each other. It was like this really involved handshake. I'm like, why does everybody know the handshake? Like, I don't know the handshake. Why do they all know the handshake?
And like when the principal would call in the mothers, for some reason, he always called in the two mothers together. That also seems strange. Like, are they a package deal? They have different kids. Like, what? I don't understand.
Well, then like all of a sudden they're at one school and then they move to the other one, and then, you know, the one kid goes away and they're just like, oh, I think it's best for him to live with his dad. But like, why? And then where does he go? Like their whole life. And then fast forward, and then they're like, what? Like adults now? They have to be, you know, probably over 18. And where were we in the middle?
And the fact that the principal made the call that I think he should stay with his dad, like, I think that's a pretty like gross overstep of a principal's responsibility to be like, I think you should give up custody of your child.
Also the teacher that's like, put your kids on drugs.
Yeah, that was very odd.
We need to drug your kids because they have ADHD. There's this going on. I starred this. Doesn't elementary school get to choose who is the guardian of a kid? I was like, when did that happen? I was like, because he's like, I think you need to go live with your dad. The next scene, it's like he's got to go live with his dad. I was like, wait a second, what just happened? And you're right. The big plot hole here is, let me back up. The idea is, let's look at these guys as heroes now. I loved that part of the movie. These guys are heroes. I think it's an interesting twist. It's an interesting thing to put in the movie that they're going to play themselves. It is. It's a way to put butts in seats, you know, like, hey, these guys are playing themselves. Incredible. I loved that idea, but there was the storyline of the terrorist attack is so small. I think they felt like, okay, well, we need to go back and fill in their entire backstory. But I think they went back too far into the elementary school. What we want to, and what we've learned here, even at Veterans Breakfast Club, is we want to learn about why you enlisted. Most veterans don't then start talking about when they were 5. They maybe talk about they had military in their family, or they talk about when they got into high school and what they started getting interested in. And they talk about maybe college wasn't working out, or they talk about they wanted to see the world. A lot of different reasons. But what we did is go way back into grade school and watch them run around with guns in the forest, and start to see little bits of like them understanding the military. There's like flashes of it in the background, a poster, this, that, the other thing, which brings me to another point is whenever, I can't remember the character, the guy, he's working at the ice cream parlor or wherever.
Jamba Juice. Was it Spencer?
Jamba Juice. He's working at Jamba Juice and he looks out the window and sees an enlistment van. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, you just spent part of the movie showing us that they were interested in the military. Like he's probably had some level of understanding. I know that this is like him trying to inform the audience in a way of like, what's that? And let's, do that whole thing where we have to teach you about what that is. But this character shouldn't have to learn about that. I would assume the character would know what that is.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, like, not to be crass or make fun of it, but I mean, I feel like they made him seem way less intelligent than he probably is in real life in that moment when you're looking out the window and it's clearly labeled like Army, Marine. Like, I'm sure this guy in real life, I have no doubt that he's intelligent, but like they made him seem very much less so. And I don't think that if you're trying to do a story about somebody in real life that is a hero, I don't think it's fair that you make them seem, less than.
Yeah. And the idea of like, going back all the way to when they're children, I'm sure part of that was to take some of the pressure off the non-actors of like, we're not going to put the entire movie on their shoulders, the entire 90-minute runtime that they have to act in it. Mm-hmm. But you go back that far, and then the inciting incident to you wanting to join the military is like buying a Marine a smoothie at your job. It just felt very odd.
Also, you mentioned it. The movie was only 90 minutes. Like, that's short for a movie. They had the time, could have gone another half an hour and filled in some of these holes for us, or given me a better ending. I'm not the ending, too.
The movie was 90 minutes?
Yeah, that was it.
Felt like 2.5 hours to me.
Oh, I thought it was fast because I saw the end of it. I was like, wait a minute, that was only an hour and a half. They had time.
And I also made a note here. He asks which branch it says, and it's on the truck. It's like, you're right, Kathryn. Like, it made him not seem very intelligent.
No, and I mean, like, these guys are smart, you know, they're, you know, it was just too much of cheese for me. It was too cheesy.
Brian.
To Shaun's point, I think it would have made more sense to straddle the timeline a little better, like a little bit before the action, and then also like the aftermath of, like, you know, what was it like to deal with that and all of those things. But at the same time, like, I get it. It's cool to like get people interested because these people are playing themselves. Very cool. I wouldn't want that. I'd be like, I want like Brad Pitt or Keanu Reeves to play me in the movie. Like, I just want to be sitting there in a director's chair watching Keanu Reeves go ham on some bad guys and be like, yeah, that's me.
Okay, pop-up question then. When someday we're making a movie about all of our lives, who's playing you? Guys, who's playing you if we're not acting as ourselves?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm going to say Carl Urban, only because I've been watching The Boys and he's pretty incredible.
Oh, that's a good pick.
I feel like Evan has to have thought about this.
Oh, geez. I mean, I sadly have not. I'm trying to think.
This is gonna be a follow-up question at the end of the podcast. We'll marinate on this as we go.
Okay, Carl was just my first thought, but I might have a different name. So they keep flashing. The problem with the movie is not only did they go back and we're watching them as grade school and sort of them growing up, which I was semi okay with, but I'd only be really okay with it if it was like, let's watch it for 10 minutes. I texted Ryan a half an hour into the movie and I said, this is 1517 to Paris, and I've seen 5 seconds of it. I was like, what am I watching? And that was my biggest issue with it, and especially the point where they were like, okay, let's get them to the point now where the two friends have enlisted. One of them's deployed to Afghanistan. The last friend, and I'm blanking on his name. Anthony, thank you. He hadn't enlisted, but they're like, hey, let's go on a trip to Europe. We're gonna all meet up. And he said, he's like, I don't got any money. He's like, yeah, well, max out your credit card. He's like, okay, cool, I'll do that. But then suddenly it became like, it wasn't a elementary school comedy. It became our summer trip to Europe, where we were like following them through Europe in these really awkward improv scenes of just like, hey, where do we go next? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Let's party. Let's hang out with this girl. Let's go sightseeing. And it was like, again, what am I watching? Like, Clint, where are we going with this? Or, you know, eventually we're going to get on the train, but why do we have to watch the tour of Europe?
Well, the only purpose I saw that scene in where were they, Amsterdam, where they were partying was like, they were talking about not going to Paris. And I guess the whole point of it there was like, if they're having such a good time and they don't go to Paris and they're not on that train, like, who knows what happens? But like, I guess that scene was important, but like, you're right. It was like too much of like, let's see the sights without showing me anything. If I'm going to go to Rome, show me the Colosseum. You know, I've never been there.
Also, at one point, the two buddies end up on a rooftop and the one whips out a cigarette and starts smoking. I was like, wait a second. It's like, when did he start smoking? He's like this guy who decided to get into serious shape. He's running everywhere. He's doing push-ups like crazy. And suddenly he's smoking. Not that I care that he's a smoker, but I was just like, where was that layered in? What part? There were all these things that kept getting thrown at us. And I think it all probably would have worked a little bit better had we gotten to the actual attack and maybe had some flashbacks within that. You were right, Evan, that was really intense. But there were points where, you know, the terrorist he cut him on the back of the neck. There were parts that, you know, he was able to injure him. And if we had flashback at that point, suddenly you're like, oh my God, what happened to him? And I want to know. Like, I know he survives, but, you know, give me a little bit of tension in that moment.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably a story that someone heard and said, this should be a movie. That's a movie. You know, 3 guys that happen to be on this train stopping an attack. But, you know, and then I think when you hear the details of it and they're like, yeah, it was like 50 seconds. You know, like this guy coming out and like then trying to extrapolate that to a movie length, like you look at something like United 93, where it's all on the plane and there's like a long period of time, and that's what I like expected from this movie, to it to be like kind of like this human kind of almost like a thriller, but everything happened so fast that I think that they were like, well, where's the movie here? And then they tried to tell the guy's story, but you're never really invested due to the kind of the lack of ability on the actor's end, and then just these bizarre choices to go back even further, and all of their relationship as kids feels very like cliched. So yeah, just by the time you do get to the attack, you don't really feel like you know the guys any better. Yeah, it's a bizarre choice on Clint's end. I would say probably one of the less successful I've seen of his.
Ryan, would you agree that the movie in some way is like a military? I hesitate to use the word propaganda, but it's like, we want to show what it's like to join the military. That's part of what I think they could have pulled out of this. And I think they really could have dove into like the idea of them enlisting, what the military meant to them, that it was important for them to serve, why those types of questions, I think would have just taken this movie to the next level of like understanding their motivations and why they're serving their country.
Sure. Yeah. I think it leaves more responsible, kind of like they've been molded through the military, so they felt this greater sense of purpose, and this is what the military can do for you, and then so they have to act even though it's like not really their responsibility. So I guess there's that piece of it, but it didn't come across real strong in the movie. So I mean, overall, 2 thumbs down from me.
This is why I don't ever want to pick the movies. We should leave it to the professionals.
It's not a bad pick. It's good. We can't always talk about the good ones like Top Gun.
Right. I mean, I would give 15-17 2 thumbs down, and the only way I'd give one thumb a medium is the end scene, the actual award ceremony in France. Watching that was kind of surreal. It was like, usually you see the actors up there and then they show this in the post credits and whatnot, but it was like, oh, this actually happened. This is the real filming. And then they sort of blue screened in the 2 mothers.
But see, I'm mad about that though, and I'll tell you why. That's what I couldn't figure out. I'm like, okay, by the time I realized that this was like actual footage, where I'm like, okay, who's that other guy up there? And then I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I'm realizing it's real footage. And then I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then I turn around and I see like, you know, their screen moms there with their actual moms. And I'm like, okay, that didn't need to happen, because if you truly want to show that you're in actual footage, but there was no like transition into like, oh, this is what happened to them after, or like, why are they not in their military uniform getting this? Like, they are in the military, they're just like in polo shirts and khakis. Like, how soon did this happen? What happened to the guy that got hurt? You know, I want to know what happened to all these, like what happened to the poor little dog? You know, I was like, there was no ending. Where did these guys go after this? Like, it just, I thought that was cool, but then I was like, oh, there's credit. Fill in the holes.
Completely agree. And for our audience, I don't know, Evan, Kathryn, if you went two thumbs down, 1 thumb sideways.
Yeah, I gotta give my boy Clint 2 thumbs down. Watch Unforgiven instead; it's better.
Yeah.
Can I give it like a down and a half? Like,
kind of where I went. Like,
I like kind of like part of it.
Simple.
By the way, I think their story is also a book. If we want to start a like DBC book club.
I don't know if I could read the book on this. I could be 200 pages in and I'm like, I've read about his like childhood handshakes. And I'm like,
Shaun would be rage texting me like, you're never picking anything ever again.
I really like that you did pick this, because I did want to see it. I was like, oh, awesome. I've wanted to watch this movie. And then halfway through,
so did I.
Like, what is going on here? So our audience, if you want to see it, I would actually suggest just fast forward till about the last 15 minutes of the movie. It's just like maybe watching Titanic. If you just want to watch the boat sink, you know, fast forward to that part and, you know, watch that part.
Or if you don't want to watch it, either watch that little part or just Google these guys and read about them, because, you know, they do deserve the recognition. It just could have been better.
Yeah. I think they could have told the story better, but the recognition for them and the act of heroism there is unquestionable. It's incredible. So that was the piece that I'm like, I'll give it a half, because what they accomplished was terrifying, and I'm so happy that they were able to subdue that terrorist, because it could have been really, really bad. So, having got that one out of the way, let's start with Top Gun 1, simply because I know every audience knows Ryan and I love this movie. Evan and Kathryn both had a bit of a different opinion, though. Kathryn, let's start with you, because you just recently watched it for the first time.
Yeah, wait a minute. If we're doing Top Gun,
yeah,
my aviator's on.
Yeah,
yes,
love the
whatever.
aviators.
Tom Cruise looks better in him anyway. No, so like, let me tell you guys a story. So I'm all excited about like, yay, we're doing another movie podcast. I'm super excited. I've never seen Top Gun. I kept seeing it come up in like Netflix and Amazon, and I never watched it. So I go home and I said to my husband, I was like, hey, guess what? We finally picked our movies for, BBC movie reviews. And he's all excited because he watches every single one of these with me, right? And he's like, oh, okay, what are we watching? And I said, told him about 1517 to Paris. And he's like, oh, I've never seen that one. And I told him a little bit about it. And he's like, oh, that's cool. I said, and we're watching Top Gun Maverick. And he's like, oh, we have to go to the movies. And I said, when we're watching the original Top Gun. And I was like, I'm excited. I've never seen it. And he looks at me and he goes, you've never seen Top Gun? And I said, no. And he goes, well, Goose dies. Ruined.
No.
Because Goose is like the type of character that I would like be like, oh, okay, he's my favorite. He's funny. He's awesome. I'm like going to root for this guy. And then I would be like, but the whole movie, I couldn't even focus because I'm like, when's Goose going to die? Is this going to ruin me? Am I going to cry? What, like, wrecked.
Spoilers. Wow.
These are things that hurt a marriage, guys.
Yeah. Strike one, buddy. Incredible.
But I my whole viewing experience was now tarnished because I 100% did not know that Goose dies in Top Gun. Swear to God, did not know, never watched anything about it. And then to find out that way, the whole movie, I'm just like, I can't like him because I know he's going to die and then I'm never going to see him again. So.
And boy, what a crux just that part of the first movie, and how much weight it bears going into the second movie, which I want to get into. But Evan, why were you not a big fan of Top Gun 1?
I think the first time that I saw Top Gun was probably at the height of my movie snobbery. When I was like starting to get into, more elevated cinema, and I was just like, this is
Give
junk.
Me Criterion Collection.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is kind of, it's a perfect encapsulation of a certain type of 80s cinema. It's kind of junky. The main romance doesn't really work. I think like the new one does a really good job of taking some of the things that I had like a problem with of the first one, like that they never mentioned the threat. It's just we're fighting someone, And I remember seeing that at the time and being like, what is going on? Why aren't they saying who they're going after? And there's a lot more like 80s corniness. The Val Kilmer character Iceman's hilarious in that movie. I think I just saw it at a period of time where I couldn't appreciate it for what it was. Mm-hmm. I might enjoy it more now where I'm just able to turn my brain off and be like, all right, it's Top Gun.
So wait, you've only seen Top Gun once?
No, I mean, I've seen it on TV, like parts of it on TV about a gajillion times.
Right.
But it's never been one of my favorite movies.
One of my favorite memes I've seen recently since Maverick came out was it's a picture of Iceman, Val Kilmer, and as the pilot in Top Gun, and then in his like official DOD like admiral photo in Maverick, and it just says the D-bag lieutenant from Top Gun becoming an admiral is the most accurate portrayal of military life I've ever seen. Like, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So let's start there with Maverick, and we'll say spoiler warning. If you've seen it, continue on with the podcast. If you haven't seen it, go see it right now. What are you doing? Why haven't you seen it? And then come back and listen to our review of it. But
giving you
Ryan,
plenty of time.
Yeah. We'll pause. You pause there. But Ryan, to start there with military accuracy, how well does Maverick hold up? I know you're
That's
Army.
a tough question because it's a Navy movie, right? And the Navy's weird. The Navy is just a weird like environment unto itself. They have different terms. They have, you know, weird traditions. So I can't really like accurately answer that. I think like, you know, and plus it's popcorn. It's you know, it's made to be like funny and entertaining, and Maverick is a Maverick and just like does things that you would never get away with, but they give him that cover in the movie, like, oh, Iceman's looking out for him and stuff like that. So it's cool. The characters are cool. I mean, I can't the John Hamm in a Navy uniform, oh my goodness. That was enough to make the movie an A+ right there, right? I mean, that was great. The uniforms, the action, the G's that they pull. I mean, it's and then the fact that Top Gun Maverick, this is my favorite part, opens just like the original movie.
Just about to say that.
It just opens up and it's just like, bam, the Naval Weapons Fighter School is Top Gun, and then it goes right into the music, and the exact same opening scene on the carrier and Highway to the Danger Zone is playing, and I'm just in the theater just like, yes.
Just I did not put that song in there. I think it would have like ruined it for a lot of people.
Totally.
Like, it had to be in there.
And you catch a very quick glimpse in that first like montage of the movie of an F-35. It's like the only time the Navy let us see one, which is like the most recent, you know, stealth fighter that we have. But then it was all about the F-18 after that. But Kathryn, go ahead.
So because I'm a nerd and I'm proud of this, I like see these things and I'm like, was this real? Like, is this what it's really like? So, you know, I go over to my good friend Google and I type in like how much of Top Gun was real. So then I went into this like YouTube hole of like how much of like Maverick and like all of that was real. And I was watching this thing. I wish I could find it now. I actually just looked, but it was on YouTube, and it's supposedly like the director talking about, he did it with some like newspaper, like the New York Times or something like that, like the director breaking down a scene. And it was that one where they're there with like the stealth aircraft. And apparently they built that. He has this line in there where he's like, we built this based off a prototype that like may or may not exist. So like, I'm thinking, and he was talking about shooting it at a site that had never before been like seen by cameras. So I'm thinking that like somewhere in some of this, like it has to be based on accuracy, at least in terms of like how they fly and like, you know, the military technology. And actually at my news station, when Maverick came out, we ran this story, I think it was like from CBS. It was a story with two of the pilots that did the flying for the original Top Gun movie. So it was really cool to talk about them, like how they did that scene where they're like right on top of each other and like how accurate the flying was. So I think like they tried to make it accurate. I mean, Tom Cruise had these like the younger actors going through like training school. Did you guys see that for Maverick? I mean, I think they tried to keep it like fairly accurate in terms of like being in the planes. I mean, they're like working as their own camera people in the planes. It was like really crazy.
Yeah, I think for the you can tell like in the vast majority of it, they're not flying the jets, but they're in jets. Like you can tell with the way that their body is reacting, like they're in real life like pulling G's, and you can see like what that does. It's pretty cool. And so my first spoiler alert, right? I had expectations going into Maverick, and I was like, okay, Maverick's gonna get shot down and then get in some super secret spy plane and then like win the war single-handedly, right? But then the super secret spy plane is in the very beginning, and then he gets shot down, which I was like, okay, that's gonna happen. And then they go the exact opposite direction. They steal an F-14, and I was like, oh, here we go.
Yes.
Like Maverick taking down 5th generation fighters in an F-14. This is ridiculous, but it's amazing. I was just like, with Goose's son in the back. I was like, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, you can't. There were a couple bait and switches in it. So yeah, that's that new advanced fighter that he was test flying in the beginning, and he takes it past Mach 10, and he burns up in the atmosphere, and you're like, okay, did we just witness the end of Maverick's life, and now we're gonna flash back and see how he got to this point? That's kind of what I thought was gonna happen, but no, he survives this, and he walks into a bar, and he doesn't know where he's at because he just went Mach 10 over the country, and you have no idea how far he went. Incredible. I almost have nothing critical to say about Top Gun Maverick at all. And I've read a lot about how people were not pleased with character development story, and the love interest. And to me, I was looking at it and I was like, character development, I thought was fine. We've already established that these are the best pilots that he's going to be training. So we don't need much character development with them. They're sort of already established. So I'm not worried about seeing them develop. Tom Cruise's character, Maverick, we're seeing him develop through the movie. And the main thing that we see him develop on, and this is something that probably hit me a lot harder after working with veterans, I would think, is his regret about Goose dying in the first one. There was so much emotional weight to that you feel that. You'll feel that presence of Goose through the entire movie. And that's something that when you listen to veterans talk about their stories, they're usually talking about the guys they served with, the guys they lost, or the buddies that they were with. And that's what I think really was hitting home through the entirety of Maverick was, we see Goose's son. He's in this group that Tom Cruise is trying to train. He doesn't want to take him on this suicide mission. He's dealing with that sort of like, how do I do this? How do I not have him hate me? Because I have no good decision here. The love interest with Jennifer Connelly, I thought it was fine. It was exactly what it needed to be. It wasn't so overt. It wasn't like layered in at every piece of the movie. It was a person that he could connect with back at the Top Gun school. That's all we needed was someone that he could talk to in private, because there really wasn't anybody else other than Iceman, who we can get to later. And plot, I mean, yeah, they're fighting another nameless country, but that's Top Gun. Like, what other plot do you really need of like, hey, we got to take down this site and we got to train to get to that point, I'm
gonna make an unpopular opinion though. Like, one of the biggest things that I hated about the first movie was like the love interest part. I'm watching this movie, like, I want to see them like flying planes and like being at Top Gun school. Like, I don't need like them at her house having some weird, like, it's 400 degrees outside, let's wear our jackets outdoors and sit here and drink wine and talk about like life. Like, I could have done without the romantic stuff of it all. Just like, fly planes, show me some action. I don't know. I just said I didn't like it.
Yeah, I think that part of it was definitely improved over the first movie. I would say overall the film felt like seeing the Stones or something, and they just shut up and play the hits. Like, it's like seeing an old touring band and they're like, we're not going to play the new album. We're going to give you exactly what you want. And especially with the way that blockbuster films have gone over the past decade or two, where heavily reliant on like CGI and these like very spectacular imagery that aren't really tied to anything human. So a lot of times I don't get emotionally invested in those films. Nothing feels exciting because they can do anything. And how many skyscrapers have I watched get swallowed by the earth, or giant explosions or stuff like that? And because so much of this is like tactile and real, like it adds so much to those action scenes. And like you said, like you can tell they're in those planes, like feeling those G's, and they're not on a green screen or anything like that. And I think like it's just very, is it the deepest film of all time? No, but it's very well done Hollywood level storytelling. Like, I love that they're showing you the mission that they're going to be doing over and over and over again. Like, it's burnt into your brain, the pathway that they have to take. They have to do the, flip upside down to go over the mountain, 2 miracles and then up and over. So when that climax does like finally come, I feel like a lot of times when I'm watching a big Hollywood movie, I don't know what's happening, where characters are in relation to each other because they're flying all over the place. But like, I knew exactly what needed to happen in that scenario. So like, there were parts where I'm like holding my breath as like planes are going over this ridge and stuff like that. So I just thought it was really well done. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, but they didn't need to, know.
What I was most happy about was a happy ending. It was just like, he gets shot down, then Goose's son goes back after him, and yeah, that kind of got a little, I was at to the point I was like, okay, wait, this could be a whole separate movie. Like, we could have ended here and we could have had a sequel of them trying to escape this country. And I loved how I found the F-14 and they get up into this thing. And that's where you like, your suspension of disbelief has happened for enough time, and you've built up enough goodwill by telling me a good story that I'm like, cool, do whatever you want, I'm here for the ride. But you're definitely going into Top Gun Maverick, especially with him like going Mach 10 and blowing up the plane at the beginning. You're like, is Maverick going to die at the end of this movie? Like, is that where we're headed? Like, are we going to have like, you know, all of this stuff? Yeah, Iceman, you know, he dies from throat cancer. But I love the fact that at the end, it just felt good. It just was like, yeah, I didn't have to mourn something at the end, which was really great. It was just like, feel good. You liked the story. You liked, you know, he gets the girl in the end. He gets all of it. It's just like, this is Maverick. Maverick is just the lucky guy who just does it all. And if I have any maybe minor critique, it is that Iceman does die in this, because it's like he sees him, they have this really great conversation. I love that scene. And Ryan, you had a good idea about that scene that I want to get to. But then the next thing you find out is that Iceman dies, and it's like, he didn't look like he was going to die in the scene that we just saw him in. So they kind of just needed to do that in the storytelling to like release the final protective layer of Maverick so that he could come back and steal an F-18 and, you know, run the gauntlet because he's the only one who can. You know, that was sort of like the only like, okay, that kind of jarred me just a touch. But talking about that scene specifically, Ryan, you noticed something in that.
Yeah. So when he goes to Iceman's house and then like, oh, he's sick again. I'm like, this doesn't surprise me. I immediately my antenna went up. Like, Val Kilmer is a notoriously like mercurial guy hard to work with, been in and just hasn't looked good well. So I'm like, okay, doesn't surprise me that they're telling me he's sick immediately. So when they see him in the room, he actually looked a lot better than I thought he was. I was expecting him to be like bedridden and just like whatever. But the other thing that was weird about this, and I was wondering if anybody else noticed this, was I don't think Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer were ever actually in the same room for that scene. Because every single time I was looking at it, they always show the other person. And if the other person is in the scene, you don't see their face. Like if you can see Val's face, you can't see Tom's face. And when they get up and they embrace and they hug, Tom's face is in shadow. You can't see it. And I was just sitting there thinking like, I don't think that they were ever in the same room for that scene. And I just thought that was really weird. And I thought the other part about it was like, oh, it's throat cancer, so he can barely talk. Like, were they only able to get Val to sign up for like 6 minutes of screen time? And he's like, I'm doing no more than 3 lines. And they're like, okay, it's okay. You don't have to, Val. We'll just type it out for you. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like
Stephen Hawking.
There's probably a backstory behind this. Like, Val was really tough to work with. And they were like, okay, whatever. We'll just get him in there, get what we need out of him, and then kill him off. And, you know, like,
I think you might be right about them not being in the same place at the same time, because thinking about how they did shoot a lot in coverage, but I do actually think that Val like has a hard time speaking now. Like,
I think he can. Yeah,
I think that like he is not taking rules, like a lot of rules, because of I don't know if it is throat cancer, but it might be. So I think that is like they went that direction with it, but I have also heard the many stories of Val Kilmer being a quite a pain to work with. So I think that it could be a mixture of the two.
Yeah.
Well, I think, wasn't there just a documentary made about Val Kilmer? And I think I had heard something or was reading something like they had to use part of his son's voice to like make his voice, because I don't know that he really can speak, like from what I had heard. Yeah, I'd have to, don't quote me on that, because I'm just trying to remember like things that I had read or whatever, but I think his voice had to be like restored or something. They did. I can't remember what the documentary's on, but I think they did just make a documentary about him.
Yeah,
so like I'd be interested.
I haven't seen it.
And me being such a fighter pilot buff and geek, like I agree that every single piece of being in the F-18s was just perfection. Every action scene was perfection. Ryan and I have spoken about how there aren't that many great films that show real true dogfighting or just interesting, exciting dogfighting. There might be 3, I think, in the entirety of like the American cinema. Top Gun probably being the best. But this one, I think, takes the cake. I think this one goes above and beyond. Not only do you get dogfighting, but you get a lot of really cool stunts. you get a lot of the flares, which people just love. You just love a good flares, especially when he pulls the brakes, flies up and over him, and releases the flares to stop the missile from hitting him. I'm just like, so many chills moments of just like you wanted to scream in the movie theater and be like, yeah. Even at the end, whenever he decides to take on, he was saved like 3 times. He's like gonna get killed by the Hind helicopter, and Goose's son saves him. They take off in the plane, and I love that it's so archaic. You see them sitting in a plane, they're trying to figure out like, what are these spark plugs? What's going on? And you know, Maverick's just like, just follow me, I know what we're doing.
Well, I love that he goes, that was your dad's job.
Yeah.
Like when he's in the back trying to figure out all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think if Bob was my favorite new character. Like, love that character. Like,
yeah,
just from his very first line, you know, in the bar where they're like, what's your call sign? They're like, who's this? He's like, oh, that's Bob. They're like, what's your call sign? He's like, it's Bob.
Yeah.
I thought Hangman was like a great Iceman stand-in too.
Yeah,
like Hangman 2.0, Iceman 2.0.
Yeah.
Like a little better looking, little younger,
right?
Just as much of a jerk.
They did a good job with some of those. The one thing I think, if I was to pick like one issue, it'd be I want justice for Kelly McGillis. Like if Val gets a role, like Kelly should get, even if it's just like, hey, this just in from the Pentagon and there's call sign Charlie just giving you an update on what's going on in sector, and it's just Kelly McGillis on a computer screen for like 2 minutes. Like that's all I wanted. Like she doesn't get to be, she gets replaced by Jennifer Connelly. That's ridiculous. That is
Meg Ryan getting killed off on screen too.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, your mom
gets killed off.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
Yeah,
I would argue that Kelly McGillis' character didn't need to be in the first one, so fine with her not being in the second. I told you I could have done the whole way without the romance drama in the first one, and I'm just gonna say it because we're skating around it, but we have to talk about it. I don't want to see any more shirtless sporting events. Like that could have gone.
Oh, come on.
No, I don't want.
That was vintage 80s.
That was great. The two, like when they were playing football with 2 balls, I had no idea what was happening. I was just like, okay, does Tom Cruise not know how football works? I'm very confused.
Also, they were like, how do we make a team? And they were like, well, have them play shirtless football-ish thing on the beach. They're a team. Like, boom.
Yeah, Ryan, is that anywhere in the handbook there for the armed forces?
There are stories I could tell, Evan, but I don't think it's appropriate. But no, I thought it was great that they like busted this like shirtless thing out, which is which brings up another point, right? Like it's another, you know, homage to the original one that we're going to show these guys without shirts on playing a beach sport. Okay, cool. But the other thing was like Tom Cruise. This is the first time I've seen Tom Cruise in a movie in a long time where I'm like, he kind of starting to look his age.
A little bit,
you know, like you know, like no matter how well you treat yourself and whatever, like you can't hide those jowls starting to form. That's just gravity taking over your 60-year-old body. And then when he is like shirtless on the beach, like you get like 1.5 seconds of like shirtless Tom Cruise. Like that's it, you know. And I was like, I think he's, you know, it was a kind of a moment for me where I was like, Tom Cruise, he's getting up there. Scientology can't save everything, Tom.
Yeah.
You're still human, you know?
Yeah, 2 big thumbs up, way up for me throughout the entire movie. I loved it from beginning to end. You know, I could watch it 10 more times and be perfectly happy every single time. And if rumor serves, I hear that they are potentially thinking of a Top Gun series to stream. I don't know how they're going to do it. You know, this had such big budget, you know, how do you put dogfighting into a series without it looking hokey? I don't know how they're going to do it, but I hope they do. I would see another sequel without Maverick. That's fine by me. Continue it on with Miles Teller if you want. One note, although I wanted to make real quick, is that, you know, they lose when they take off with that F-14 at the end, they lose their front end landing gear. So, you know, when they get back to the aircraft carrier, they're like, oh crap, they're going to have to land without their front landing gear. And I'm glad that they decided to show that. I'm glad that that was something that the Navy, maybe the Navy had checklists of like, we need you to show this, this, and this to, you know, to show just different things that the military can accomplish or the military can do and the Navy can do or whatever, because I'm glad they didn't just gloss over that and suddenly they're back on the aircraft carrier and like, everything's great. You just knew that last hurdle was like, they're going to have to land without landing gear. And they showed that. They showed the F-14 how it was going to land and be able to, survive a land onto an aircraft carrier without it. I thought that was really cool. Just a cool technical thing that they decided to keep.
I agree. I thought that was pretty cool. And it jogged something in my brain. Like I knew that Navy carriers could like do that, but it was like cool to see it happen. I thought that was really neat. To your point, I was thinking about like realism in the military. And the one thing that did pop out was like that Evan brought up, right? You see the rehearsal of this mission like 100 times before them to get to it. And that is a very realistic thing. Like if you know you're going to do a mission, like you're going to prepare for it like over and over and over again and do rehearsals. And the military has this whole thing called rock drills or rehearsals, and they want them to get as realistic as possible so that when it's go time and you get to the action, like you are all prepared and know exactly like what needs to happen in what order to do that. And then you have like contingency planning and all sorts of other things. And that was the one thing that did stick out to me is like, what if those two miracles don't happen? Like, I guess they had those people in reserves, but you think you'd want them like closer. Like now the bad guys kind of know you're coming. You think you'd want like, instead of just two teams with like, you each get one shot. And if you miss, you're kind of screwed. Like, why wouldn't there be another team like immediately behind them? Yeah. So that was kind of like one thing that kind of stood out to me. Like you're asking for two miracles to happen, but you have no real contingency plan if one of them does it.
Well, so. It had to be put in for America's Top Gun talent. We had to have an elimination round. So that they could all compete. Because if there was, if Iceman 2.0 was right behind them, it was like, okay, well, they missed, so this guy's got to make it.
Yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, I loved it. I mean, it was just nostalgic, and it was awesome. And the new characters are great. I think that the Miles Teller, Rooster character, I mean, picked a fantastic actor for that. I mean, he looks like he could be Goose's son, which I think like really was cool.
The whole way through it, I think maybe it's because of the traumatic way that I found out that Goose died, but like the whole way through it, I'm like, are they gonna kill off Rooster? Like, am I gonna have to go through this again? Like, I had this like little fear in the back of my mind, like, is that gonna be Maverick's character development, that he not only has to lose Goose, but he has to lose Rooster too? So I did have that like little thought in the back of my mind the whole way through, which I like appreciated because I thought it made it like a little more suspenseful in that regard. I don't know if I'm like the only one in the universe who thought that, but there were points in my mind where I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose Rooster too.
Yeah, and they did a good job, as Evan said. It was very tactile, it was very real, and they did a very good job, I think, of making the threat feel palpable like the whole time. Like, this is not going to be easy, and the chances of survival are very low. And they really painted that picture throughout the entire movie, both in briefings and in the training and everything. They did a good job of that.
And I like that they did say at the beginning, because you had to think, anybody that knows anything about fighter jets or Navy or Air Force would say, well, what about the F-35 or the F-22? Why can't those do it? And, they laid that out in the mission, like this is going to be a very low flying, that would mess with the F-35's radar. Like there are different things that they were saying, like you can't use the F-35 for this purpose. So the F-18 is what we have to use. And the problem is that we're going to use an F-18 and potentially have a dogfight against fifth generation fighters. And they say that a ton. Fifth generation fighters. You're going to have to fight them. But the maneuvers that the fifth generation fighters did whenever we got to that point, that just made it worth it. It was like, okay, which brings me to my last point. And maybe this is the only slight other criticism, is that it sort of paints the Navy as being behind, in a way, being behind the ball. Like, we're not as technologically advanced as we should be. Which, if you know anything about the F-35 or the F-22, we're quite a bit further ahead than where we were at with the F-18. And even the F-18 Super Hornet is pretty advanced. So you can't necessarily look at the Navy and be like, well, God, they're so far behind. Like they have some pretty advanced fighters at this point as well.
I just got this like vision of like Shaun and Ryan. Like, I know you didn't see the movie together, but like I just got this mental image of you two like sitting in a theater with your popcorn, and then like a dramatic moment happens and you both just standing up and go, yes, like popcorn flying everywhere. Like, I loved it.
We did have an actual slow motion / paused high five.
Yeah.
That's like the next time we do this, I feel like that's the movie experience I want. Like, I just want to watch something that you guys love and like have you freak out and like spill your popcorn everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the way the movie ended when I walked out of the theater was like the end of the Breakfast Club. I just had my fist up and
Yeah.
not much.
Now I want to go find out what my call sign is.
This wraps up our movie review episode. I hope that if you are listening, that you see both movies or all three movies. Why not? Send us some comments, an email, Shaun, SHAUN at veteransbreakfastclub.org. We'll go around the horn here. Evan, any final thoughts?
No, definitely go see Top Gun Maverick. 15, 17 to Paris. If you're a Clint completist, yes. Otherwise, you can skip that one.
Kathryn?
R.I.P. Goose. Never going to get over it. That's all I have to say.
And Ryan?
Highway to the Danger Zone, man. And
it's still such an incredible song.
I can't wait to buzz the tower again. Like,
right.
Just a fantastic movie. Just so nostalgic. It is what it is. Just like Evan said, it is, and it does it great. So I was just so excited to see it. So excited to talk about it with you guys. And justice for Kelly.
Justice for Hashtag justice for Kelly. Well, if you're listening to the Scuttlebutt, we'll have another movie review episode coming up next season. We'll have to have Ryan, I believe you're up to be the next person to choose 2 more movies for us to review. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release the new episodes every Monday. Thank you for watching, and we see you on the next episode of the Scuttlebutt. Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank both of our sponsors, the first being D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s, but they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D. That's D&D Autosalvage.com. Thank you so much to D&D. They've been a sponsor for quite some time, and we really appreciate their support. The second being tobacco-free Adagio Health. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit, and they have classes and nicotine replacement therapy and a popular quit line, which is the easiest number to remember ever, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Finally, tobacco-free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all of what tobacco-free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org, or you can watch our recent episode with tobacco-free Adagio Health on the Scuttlebutt, where they talk about a lot of the programs that they offer for those who are looking to quit. Thank you to both of our sponsors for their continued support of the Scuttlebutt podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks.